Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lester's Expert Watch Reviews. I am Lester, and I am an expert watch reviewer. I did not realize the great demand for my reviews until I recently read the comments on my channel regarding the Tutter versus the Tizot. A lot of the people, my viewers, were requesting additional videos because of the content that I provide. For those of you that do not know me, I am an expert watch reviewer, and I try to provide clear information for people that don't understand watches and to help them decide which watch is right for them. Now, this is only my second video, but I'm going to start making a lot more in order to help the many people out there that are in situations and they don't know what to choose. So what I try to do is I try to put watches together that are very similar. Watches that people might be considering to get. They don't know which one. Watches from a similar class of watch. And I try to point out the pros and cons of each watch. And today we're going to be talking about two very similar watches. Hold on, let me just get my pointer. We got a Casio G-Shock Square. This is it right here. They call this the Square, even though it has 8 sides. Casio has a lot of confidence to be able to do that. See, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On the left side here, we have the Christopher Ward 300 diver. So I first want to start with the biggest differences, and that would be in the movements of these watches. Right off the bat, the G-Shock movement is much quieter. If you put this one to your ear, you're going to hear like a ticking sound. What I found is at night, when I put that on my bedside table, which is made out of wood, sometimes I can hear that sound. It wakes me in the night. The movement in the G-Shock, I can barely hear this ticking. I hold it up to my ears and I can hear a slight ticking in the background as the seconds go by. I'm not sure of what this movement is in here. I'm pretty sure it's a G-Shock movement. It's very quiet. The Christopher Ward uses a stiletto S200, and just based on the quietness alone, I'm gonna have to give it to the G-Shock. Also, the battery in the G-Shock or G-Shock, it depends who you ask. It's charged by solar. Not only just solar, if you read right here, it's tough solar. The solar panels are tough, and that says a lot about it. Whereas the battery in the Christopher Ward is what they call a mechanical watch. See this movement in here? That movement has to charge a battery, which in turn runs a motor. That motor runs your hands here. And that's why they call it an automatic watch. It's the movement that charges the battery. Those are your differences. This is also much accurate movement. It syncs with the atomic clock, so that makes it much more accurate. For all intents and purposes, COSC certified, whereas my Christopher Ward will gain up to 3 seconds per day. And then if you go over the course of a year, it'll gain 18 minutes. The one here on the left. But this one is dead on. I'd say better than COSC certified. Next thing I want to draw your attention to is the bands. And right away, I really don't need to say much here. You can see one is much better quality. Not only is the G-Shock better quality, it's a better band in other ways. Listen to the Christopher Ward band. You hear that? What does that sound like to you? It imitates the sound of a popular fishing lure known as a rattle trap. That, with this shiny band, can attract sharks. So if you're in the water swimming, like in the ocean, and you have this on, it's a bright sunny day, the light's going to be reflecting off this, and then if it's a little bit loose, making that sound, there is a chance that it's going to attract sharks, and that's going to increase your risk of a shark attack. Whereas your G-Shock is matte colors, not very shiny. It's not going to draw attention to you. And listen to when I shake it. Hear that? Nothing. Also, Christopher Ward, if you look at their design, they went through all this engineering and mechanics to make a clasp. Look at this thing. See all that? All that nonsense. Whereas the G-Shock is simple. Look at this. Look at the simplicity. See that? It's simple. So band-wise, we're going to have to give that to the Casio. Another issue I noticed as soon as I got this, and this is a newly released watch, and it's nothing I'm going to return it for. I'm just going to fix it myself. I noticed that this bezel turns. Look at the bezel on the G-Shock. See it? It's fixed. It's not going to turn. Watch this. Can't turn it. It's fixed. I was going to send this back and tell them, but you know, it's not worth my time. I'm just going to put some epoxy in there just so it doesn't turn anymore. While we're on the face of the watch, let's talk about the numbers. Here you can tell the time. 1843. That's military time. With the Christopher Ward, it says 6:42. See, it took me a lot longer to see what time it was on the Christopher Ward because it doesn't have numbers. And if you're ever in an emergency situation, say you're running away from a criminal who wishes to do you harm, and let's say you need to look at your time. You need to know what time it was, what time this incident is happening. When you're running and look at this, it's going to be very hard to tell the time. With this, you're going to put your wrist up and you're going to be able to easily tell the time. So in that sense, I'm going to have to give it to the G-Shock. I have this G-Shock set to put off a chime every hour. And the benefits of that are obvious. There's many benefits of it. But let's say you're at your house, you're cleaning out a closet, and heaven forbid you pass out. And now you're in that closet and no one knows where you're at. And you need, let's say, medical attention. If you're wearing this Christopher Ward, yeah, it's going to make the ticking sound, but that's not going to be loud enough to alert like emergency medical services or a family member where you're at. Whereas with the G-Shock, you're going to have a chime every hour. That chime's going to go off. People are going to hear it and they're going to say, hey, I think we found them. And it's going to draw their attention to where you're at. Now, let's talk about the Lume. Let me give these a little charge. I'm using a UV light here to charge them. Charge the G-Shock a little bit. I'm going to charge the Christopher Ward. All right, that's about even, I think. Now, which one has brighter Lume? Well, you might think the Christopher Ward, but watch. Now that I have that Lume fully charged on the G-Shock, I just push the button here. Look at that. See that button? That button activates the Lume. So it, limits the amount of time that it's on. Whereas the Christopher Ward, it's on all this time and that's draining from the battery. Unless I give it an extra charge with this UV light, it's pulling from the battery and you're going to notice it dim over time. So right off the bat, the G-Shock is better. Let's look at the cases. The Christopher Ward has this, what they call a light catching case, has this polishing, beveled edge and all this other stuff. This one has a non-light catching case. Once again, it's going to be good to help protect you from shark attacks, or let's say you're walking, let's say you're at the beach and you're not even diving, you're not even in the water, bird attacks. We've all seen Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds, and it's not something that happens regularly, but metal objects do attract birds. Shiny objects, things like that. Not going to have that problem. Birds could, see the Christopher Ward if the sun hits it right, and they could, descend upon you. And if there's a lot of them, there's no telling what they could do. Now, another obvious thing on the G-Shock, there are numerous buttons. That is also pretty much self-explanatory in terms of why the quality is better. If you look at, say, the top cell phones today, Android and iOS phones, Apple phones, they all have some kind of button. Okay, and there's a reason for that. Good technology requires buttons. Christopher Ward, no buttons. Look. Look. Let me get my pointer. Nothing. You got a crown. And while we're talking about the crown guards, they don't fully protect the crown, whereas the crown guards on the G-Shock protect your crown very, very well. If you look at your face, the G-Shock is water resistant to 20 bar. A bar is like a standard to measure. It's about 10 feet. So this would be 200 feet. Basically, it's based on a bar. It's like an average unit of measure for distance. Or like your average bar, or tavern ceilings are about 10 feet high. If you average them, some are a little higher, some are a little lower, but generally speaking, a bar is about 10 feet. So this is 200 feet water resistance. Christopher Ward, 1,000 feet. So I don't know, what's that, 50 bars? I'm not real good at math. No, I think that'd be 40 bars. So this is 40 bars. This is 20 bars. I'm going to give that to the Christopher Ward just because it can go a little bit deeper. But if you're looking at these two watches, I'm going to say to go with the G-Shock. Obviously, it has better features. It's safer, keeps better time, looks nicer, less chance of shark attacks, bird attacks, etc. There is a downfall of wearing a G-Shock. It's kind of like, I brought this out as an example. You know, you're not going to walk out on the street and start flashing big bucks, you know, letting people know what kind of money you have. So with the G-Shock, if you're wearing that, people might think, oh, there's a person of great wealth, etc. And you might be more prone to muggings. So that's the pros and the cons of each watch. If you're looking at either of these watches, my personal preference is the G-Shock, but you have to make your own decision. And one other thing, if you notice here, G-Shock, it's basically, from what I understand, and you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but this watch is protected against shock, like if electricity were to go through it, whereas this one's not. So, you know, I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people, including myself, you know, I get shocked on a regular basis, just, you know, just from things like, you know, you're plugging something into the outlet and you accidentally touch the prongs on the plug and it gets you. Or, you know, if you're swimming during a lightning storm, anything like that. If you're to get shocked, there's a pretty good chance this watch is might still work after the shock, whereas your Christopher Ward, I would highly doubt it after it gets electrocuted. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Lester's Expert Watch Reviews.